Hi everyone, it's time for Ask a Witch. Today we're going to be making incense and talking about what incense is and what it does and why it's used. And you can see I have a little group of goodies here which I will show you how to use. I'm going to go in a little closer so you can see. I have some tree resin here, which is a wonderful material for incense. I also have another piece here. I have some dragon's blood here, which is a sap from a tree that has like a red sap. And I have some amber, which is like the dried fresh amber. Smells really good. I have some things like sandalwood. I have some benzoin gum. I have some incenses I've made here. This one is a clearing incense, which is made with Palo Santo wood and some other ingredients, and it also works well for cones, and you can see that little cone there that made that. And then this other incense here, the more red one, this is a vision incense, and it actually has the seeds of datura in it, and henbane, so it's a vision quest kind of incense. I have some charcoal tablets, which I'll show you how to work those and why you would use those and what you would use them for. I have some essential oils. I have some a smudge stick here, which is also a kind of incense. And then I have some what are called resin incenses here, which are mostly big chunks of things. And so I'll show you how those work and how to make those and how those burn. And then I've got some stick incense here that I purchased at a Renaissance fair, and I'll show you that. And then I have some incense blanks, which you can get from lots of places, but I think I ordered these from Amazon, actually. And then I have my mortar and pestle, which, as you can see, is fairly massive. This I got from a Chinese grocery. So I would, if you want to make incense in more than tiny amounts and you don't want to kill yourself in the grinding process, I would get a big heavy one. Some witches use a coffee grinder that they get at a thrift store, and you can do that. I don't feel, for me at least, I don't feel like it puts as much energy into the incense as doing it by hand, but it certainly takes less time. So it's up to you, what you have time for. And then I have a group of herbs over here that I'll try to touch on as many of them as I can today. So let me switch the screen around. See me? Alrighty. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about incense before I start putting it together. Incense is a type of medicine delivery, and I know that we don't think of it that way in the Western world, and a lot of us been exposed to the really chemically stuff that you often find in stores. But incense in the rest of the world is not that. It's like, if any of you have ever been in a Catholic church, if you grew up Catholic, or you know someone, been to a funeral or a ceremony there, you'll notice that there's always a censer swinging around with smoke coming out of it, and that censer has frankincense and myrrh in it. Frankincense and myrrh represent the sun and the moon. They're like masculine and feminine, the whole unity of energy. And so they were used in the Middle Ages as a fumigant, meaning that frankincense and myrrh are both very antiseptic. They're antiviral and antimicrobial. And in the Middle Ages, we were dealing with some crazy flus and some crazy plagues and things like that. And churches were gathering places where those things could be transferred. And so any gathering place always had frankincense and myrrh, other kinds of antimicrobials burning in them because of their antimicrobial effects. So if you think about it in that respect, incense has been used as a medicine making or medicine technique for a long time. Incense also has aromatherapy properties. It brings the mind into a place of calmness and a place of feeling more balanced, focusing on other things besides our daily pressures and stresses. And it makes your house smell good. Frankincense and myrrh lavender, tree saps, things like that, all have the effect of killing germs. So they are really great, you know, for prevention of disease. In a lot of cultures, I know that in native cultures, for example, Native American cultures, that a lot of medicines are smoked and or burned. And that is a common delivery system. So when you think about incenses, don't just think, oh, something that smells nice. Think this is something that can actually alter your state of beingness, can cure illnesses, can prevent illnesses, can do many things that you don't really think of as incense, you know, of being able to do, but it can do those things and does, and has for thousands of years. Now, one of the most common forms of using smoking herbs is the smudge stick, and I have one here. And the smudge stick is just a rolled group of leaves. I usually take a bunch of the leaves that I want to use, you know, for smudging, which is clearing energy, and roll them up in newspaper and then twist the ends and let it dry. And then I end up tying the sticks with some hemp twine or something like that. I don't use cotton because cotton is often sprayed with some pretty heavy pesticides, even though it does burn. It's not really the best thing to be breathing. Hemp is a safer thing. And so I get hemp twine to use to tie them with. But basically all you have to do with a smudge stick is you just, once you have it all dried, once it's dried and wrapped up, you just light it. And it starts to smoke. And sage also is very antiseptic, and so not only does it clear energy, but it also kills germs. So that's awesome, right? And so you just take your smudge stick, and I always feel like when I smudge myself that it's kind of like an energetic shower, you know, like you get all the, you know, the undercarriage there and make sure everything's nice and clean, because we carry a lot of crap with us every day, especially in our crown chakras and our heart chakras. So using the sage smudge, it, you know, to me at least, the smell of sage is calming, but also very, very clearing. Now, in a lot of traditions, you wouldn't just end there. You would then burn something sweet, like sweetgrass. I make sweet smudges, and I use lemon verbena. I roll up some lavender and some lemon verbena and some mugwort and some sage together, and that makes the air sweeter, the smell sweeter. I don't have access to sweetgrass here, but if you do have access to sweetgrass or vanilla grass is also used by a lot of traditions to not just clean the energy with your smudge, but then reset the energy in a direction of sweetness. So clear, all sage does is clear. It just cleanses. But you can also add other effects after you cleanse the energy. If you want the energy to go in a particular direction, you can also burn herbs in that way. So smudge is an easy one because, you know, you can buy these. I should tell you that white sage is now on the endangered list, mostly the wild white sage. And so it's really important to know what the source is of your white sage. Most of my white sage is sourced from individual growers who grow it in their own herb gardens and then send it to me, or I get it when I go down to warmer areas of California. That's generally where you'll find it. I get it from friends who grow it in their gardens. But wild crafted white sage is becoming endangered, so be careful about that. It's such a popular herb to use for cleansing now that it's being over harvested. So it's important to recognize that. And this is a wonderful sage wand that was given to me by a wonderful witch friend of mine who got it from a person who grows it. So lovely, lovely, lovely. The other thing that you can do, you know, you can buy incenses if you want to. There are certainly lots of sources. Like I said, I got this one from a Renaissance fair. And it has these sticks, and basically what this is an incense stick that doesn't have a piece of wood in the center of it, so it's just the incense itself, so it burns all the way up. I actually kind of prefer these to these, but these blanks are harder to find, I've found. And so with an incense stick like this, you need to have something that it can burn on all the way down, so, you know, so that it comes in contact with metal or something like that once it's burned down. So you just light the end like that, and then let it burn a minute so that it gets a nice little glowy tip on it. And then put it into an incense holder that's designed for such an incense. So, and it's important to recognize, like I have one here. I'll pan this down a bit. And you can see, I think, let's see. This incense holder here has a hole in the middle of it, so I'm just going to put the incense right in there like that. And it will hold it while it burns all the way down. Okay? So that's how that works. And then cone incense, which you can make pretty easily, as well as loose incense. Cone incense is just incense that is ground into a powder and then rolled into a cone shape like clay. And what you do is you make your incense, like this is what this is made out of, is this Palo Santo incense, and it has some self-igniters in it. It has, its base is Palo Santo wood. You always want to have a wood. A wood is important. An igniter is important. Something like gum triticantha or benzoin gum is important. And then whatever herbs you want to have for the effect or the fragrance. Not everything smells the same burning as it does, you know, in its unburned form. I've learned that. Things like, for example, we love the smell of citrus, but if you grind up citrus and put it into an incense, it just smells like burning. Well, it smells like burning, not even wood. It smells like something like peeling that's burning, and it doesn't smell citrusy at all. So you take something like that you put together, and you add water to it. You can also add some essential oils, things like that. That's a little trickier, but water works just as well. Roll it into a cone shape, you know, like you would a piece of clay, and then put it in your oven on the lowest possible setting or in a dehydrator and let it dry out. And once it dries out, you can light it, and you'll see that, you know, this, because this has benzoin gum in it, it lights and stays lit pretty well. And the biggest problem with cones is making sure they stay lit and burn all the way down. And that really, the taller they are and the thinner they are, this one's kind of squat and fat. But so far all these that I've burned, all burned down all the way. And so you start it off like so, and then you put it in on your incense tray and let it burn. And the nice thing about these is they burn a long time, a lot longer than stick incense. So if you're doing a meditation or you're working on something, you don't want to have to keep lighting incense, or you want to not lose your focus or be distracted, then these are really good because they'll burn for a long, long time. So you can see this little cone is burning just fine, and it was really, really easy to make. I just used water to bind it with. So easy to do incense. It smells really fabulous. Now, if you want to do some easy incenses, then you can do gum incenses, and you don't even have to really do that much to them. You can, I get these little charcoal things from Amazon. You can get them pretty cheap there. You can get 10 packages of these. These are used for hookahs and things like that. It's just a little tablet. They come in various sizes, but I like the larger ones. And then you light those with a match, and they have igniter in them so that they will burn and get pretty hot. And then you can, once they are kind of glowing, then you can put incense on them, and they'll burn incense for hours and hours. So you can see how the little sparks are coming off of it. When I take away the match, the little sparks are still there. So what I'm going to do is let it get good and started. And then now that it's good and started, I'm going to set it in my incense tray. Okay. And I'm just watching it go across. I'm going to turn you around. Okay. So you can see it's going across. The little sparks there. Okay. So once it goes all the way across, and it's good and ignited so it won't go out, then you can add incense to it. And so I have some gum incenses. This is one that's called Temple of the Sun. I've had it for a long time. They last forever. It's made with a bunch of different resins, like the dragon's blood and the tree sap and that sort of thing. So all you do is you take a little bit of this incense, like so. Okay, and then you just drop it on that charcoal like that, and you'll notice that it starts to smoke after a few minutes, and it'll start to melt as the charcoal gets hotter and hotter. See how it's melting into the charcoal there? And that's all there is to it. You can also put powder incense on your charcoals too. There's not absolutely necessarily need to be a resin incense, but it makes it really easy because you can just combine resins together and then burn them and get a wonderful effect without a lot of work. But you can certainly put things like the incense that's ground up. See, it works just fine. Okay, so I'm going to go back to looking at me now. Okay, so the resin incenses are just a combination of resins and you can also burn things like woods. Like I have some juniper berries, or I have some cinnamon, and I could just take a couple of pieces of the cinnamon and put it right on there and let it burn. It smells delicious in here, I must say, with all these incenses burning. So how do we make an incense? So let's make an incense. So you have an idea of how that works, because it's really pretty easy. Now, for a resin incense, you don't necessarily need an igniter. You can just use resins and combine things together that will burn. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to combine some cinnamon. Cinnamon is a great herb for prosperity, so I'm going to put some cinnamon into the grinder here. Okay, so I'll put about a tablespoon in there. All right, and so I like the smell of cinnamon a lot. I'm also going to put a couple of juniper berries. Juniper is also a nice one for prosperity and well-being, so about 7 or 8 berries in there. It's going to be good. I'm going to use a little bit of frankincense and myrrh, because frankincense and myrrh are like the whole world. So I'll put some of that in there. I've got some myrrh. You can see it's kind of dark. Oop, I'm kind of dark, so I'll put that in there. And I'm going to put some frankincense in there. Now, if you want to have your incenses come out the same each time, then, you can measure everything really carefully. I would recommend that if you're really particular about how it comes out each time. I'm not as particular. I kind of let it flow when I do incenses, but it's totally up to you. Now I'm going to switch you back so you can see inside the grinder. This is what it looks like in there. You can see there's some lovely chunks of resin in there. Also, let's go back to the charcoal, see how well that's burning. So all the incenses are burning very, very well. Okay, so if I just want to do like a resin incense, I can just take this and take my pestle and kind of beat the resin down a little bit so it's not so huge, because I got some big chunks in there. So take my heavy pestle and just break up those big chunks of resin. Okay, you can see how that's breaking up really nicely. Now the pieces don't have to be super small for a resin incense. They just have to be small enough to get into the mouth of the jar for storage. Okay, so I could totally stop right here. I don't know what's going on there. Stop right here and burn this just as it is. This is perfect. I can also add essential oil if I want to. Things like peppermint could be added to an incense for enlivening, or citronella for chasing off insects, things like that. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this incense and I'm going to put some on the charcoal here. And you can see it burns just fine. Okay, so it's really pretty easy to do. Now, if I want to make an incense that is a powder incense and roll it into cones, then I'm going to have to grind it up quite a bit more. And I'm also going to have to add an igniter to it. So I have some benzoin gum here, which is pretty easy to order. And this is some that I had that I've held on to for a while. Just looks like ground resin, and gum triticale, same sort of thing. Ground triticale is what's in most of the incense sticks like this. That's what most of it is, which is astragalus root. Okay, so I'm going to put some igniter in there. You can see about a tablespoon. Okay, and then I'm just going to take my pestle and I'm going to keep going. Okay, until I have this all ground up into a fine powder. I've got my wood in there, which is my cinnamon. I've got my resins in there, which is my frankincense and myrrh, and my juniper. I've got my juniper in there, which is my herb, and then I've got my igniter. So this would be a great incense for visioning prosperity, for like doing positive affirmations around prosperity. And you just grind it until it turns into a fine powder. And then once it's a fine powder, then you very, very carefully add water to it. By very carefully, I mean like a teaspoon at a time, until it's moldable, but not sloppy. Okay, so it's like modeling clay. And then once it's like modeling clay, then you can shape it into whatever shapes you want. It's not uncommon for people to shape it into cones. You can see my little cone there burning very nicely. See, it's burning down perfectly. And it's not even ground up that fine. I just, we were doing a class and we got to the point where we got tired, so we stopped. But it has to be fine enough to be able to, roll it into a shape and have it stay. If it's too granular, it won't stay. Now, one of the things I want to add to this incense, is because I just like the smell of it, is amber. So I have some lovely amber resin. And a lot of witchy stores will have this, but you can also order it from a lot of herb stores. And it has a very, very strong amber smell. It's like amber resin. Looks like that. So in a very small amount will be very, very nice in any incense. Burns very, very well. Breaks up very, very well. So, and when you're doing your incenses too, you want to think about what it is you want to achieve with your incense. This is a magical preparation. So you really want to think about, okay, what do I want this incense to do? What do I, what's my purpose in making this incense? And you can see that as you go, the incense gets finer and finer. And I would say, grind it in a clockwise position so that you can build the energy in it. If you have a group of people that are working together, do some chanting or some spell work associated with it. But just keep grinding it until it's nice and fine. And then when it's nice and fine, you'll be able to roll it into the shapes that you want to roll it into, and make incense that works really, really well. Now, I'm down to 6 minutes, so what I want to do, because there's a fair number of people who've come on today to see this, I would like to see if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about. One other thing, too, is if you want to make visioning incenses, there are things that you can use, like mugwort is something that you can use, which is a sedative hypnotic. Okay, so do you ever use dried herbs in creating incense? Yes, in fact, that's any dried herbs can be used that you like the smell of. So you don't necessarily have to use resins, although resins will help the incense burn better. You can go with a wood, an igniter, and then some herbs. That's fine too. And so I have a lot of different herbs I use. I use rosemary. This is from my own garden. I use lavender, also is wonderful. You just want to grind it up. Make sure you grind it up. Although you can burn lavender straight on a charcoal just like it is, because it just burns nice that way. Cloves, things like cloves are nice. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we have a lovely cedar that I make smudge sticks out of, but I also use an incense, makes a fabulous incense. Sage from the garden is also good. And lemon verbena, also very lovely. So yes, herbs can be used. Remember, it's like a medicine making technique. So when you're using the herbs, remember what they do. Think about what their properties are and how, you know, how you want to have that show up in your incense. So any other questions about incense making? I want to say one other thing too is you can also grind up things like things that are poison plants too for visioning purposes, but make sure that you know what you're doing. Like for example, I have this little datura here, and datura seed in incense makes it pretty strong and pretty vision questy. But you have to be careful about how much you add and how much you breathe, because it's a very, very powerful plant. Belladonna is another one. I've got some belladonna berries. I've ground up belladonna leaves and belladonna berries in incense before. Again, it's not something you want to eat or be too, you know, too crazy with. And then I also have used henbane seeds. These are henbane flowers, the dried seed pods, and so I've used some of those. So there's lots of things like that for vision incenses. Wormwood works really well. I'd say wormwood's probably the safest one. It's a type of mugwort, and it's Artemisia absinthium. So it's used a lot for, it's used in absinthe. So, you know, we all know about the green fairy, right? And so keep in mind that these are all sedative hypnotics. Hypnotic means that they are mildly hallucinogenic. So if Vision Quest is something that you want to do, that's great. But use the herbs sparingly and wisely if you're using them in incense. Otherwise, again, remember the rule. You need a wood, something that's wood like sandalwood or Palo Santo wood or cinnamon wood, something like that. You need some kind of igniter, either gum triticanthe or benzoin gum. Those work really, really well. And you're going to need some herbs or some resins or both for your scents and for your effects. So I hope that this was a helpful video for you, and I hope that you won't be afraid to try out some incenses, because it's really lovely to have your own incenses and to put the things in them that you want to, because you can make incenses for any purpose. You can make incenses that are, you know, good for certain kinds of spell work. Oh, and another thing too, you can also enhance any spell work with dragon's blood. Dragon's blood is an enhancer, and it makes any spell much stronger. So using dragon's blood in your incense is really a powerful thing. You want to make sure that you have some ventilation when you burn this, because it smokes so much that it will fill up your house really fast. But it smells absolutely lovely. I love the smell of this herb, of this resin. And so it's another type of resin that you can use, and you can find it. It's gotten fairly expensive, but you can get it from Mountain Rose Herbs. They have it not all year, but most of the year, and it's not crazy. I think it's about, last time I checked, it was something like $25 or $30, maybe more, a pound. But I mean, a pound will last you the rest of your life. So, you know, order it with some friends. And also tree resins, you know, just walk around the forest and you'll find this stuff. This stuff is great. And this is natural amber. This is basically what amber is this is a tree resin. So you can find those things just walking around the forest. So keep in mind that incenses are pretty easy to make and pretty easy to you know, find the materials for just common herbs that you like the smell of, and resins that are fairly easy to get. I would definitely go with organic herbs. It's really important to consider, because you're breathing these things, you want to make sure that the herbs you're using are organic. So I hope that that was a helpful class for you. And I'm going to be putting this on Patreon later in the week. I also want to let you know that my schedule has moved back to having Wednesday evenings free, so I'm going to be in December doing them on Wednesdays. And I may have a week at the end of December when I'll be moving where I may not be able to hold one. But if I can't hold one, I'll make sure and reschedule it, okay? So I'll put up the schedule in the next few days for next month, and I'll see you next Wednesday. You can also catch these at any time on YouTube or on Patreon. YouTube is just Crone Witch is the address, and on Patreon it's patreon.com/Crone Witch. It's pretty easy to find me. Okay, so thank you for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed the broadcast, and I will see you next week.